the Odyssey app. This has been coverage.
Standing room only here at Parkway West High School. My name is Annie Frey. I will be your moderator for the evening. I host the Midday Talk Show on 97.1 FM Talk. We are joined tonight by 3 candidates in the race for Missouri governor. All candidates that are participating in this race were invited to attend, and these are the ones who chose to make this event a priority. First, we welcome Senator Bill Eigel. Our next candidate, Secretary Jay Ashcroft. And our third and final candidate, Mr. Chris Wright. Gentlemen, are you ready to begin? All right. As a reminder, I will ask the first question to Senator Eigel. The other candidates will have an opportunity to answer, and then you all 3 will have an opportunity for a brief follow-up. Senator Eigel, first question. What does it mean to you to be a Republican candidate?
Well, first of all, thank you everybody for being here tonight. And really, to be a Republican candidate means that we ought to be the champions of defending the liberties and rights of our citizens, because we know, first of all, that the Democratic Party isn't going to do it. And everywhere they've gotten in power, including Washington, D.C., or even here in the state of Missouri, down in the city of St. Louis, they're not going to protect the rights of their citizens. So Missouri, the good news is Missouri, for the past 2 decades, has chosen Republican leadership and principles to lead this state. The problem that we've run into is that there is a status quo down in Jefferson City right now that doesn't prioritize the protection of rights. And because we have this status quo of effectively a uniparty that is including of both elected Republicans and elected Democrats, Missouri is stagnating because we are not doing the big, red, bold, conservative ideas that we're seeing happen in other states. Now, I come from a family of 4. I have a son and a daughter, and my daughter, Lisa, who just graduated high school a few weeks ago, she has a 4.0 GPA. She's beautiful. She got both of those things from her mother. Now, that being said, I know where she's going to be successful wherever she goes, but I'd like to see her have that success right here in the state of Missouri. So pushing back against the status quo has come naturally for me. I'm actually part of 4 generations of my family that have served in the United States military. My grandfather was a cook for the U.S. Army in World War II. My father was a pilot in the Air Force. Both my wife and I were aircraft maintenance officers. My son is the newest member of the U.S. Navy, and I think that with that kind of leadership and that kind of experience, we're going to make Missouri great again.
So, Secretary Ashcroft, I'm going to ask you this question, and then Mr. Wright, I'm going to ask you this question, and then we're going to come back around and give you those 3-minute opening statements, okay? Secretary Ashcroft, what does it mean to be a Republican candidate?
Unfortunately, these days in Missouri, it means that you believe in big government. And that's why we need different Republicans in Jefferson City. We need Republicans that understand that true Republicans stand for the proposition that we, the people, are what's important, not government. We need elected officials that will spend every minute of every hour in Jefferson City figuring out how to make sure that we, the people, can make our own decisions. We can maximize our potential, and we can be free from government restraint. That's why, as Secretary of State, I've worked to give people more options. I've worked to protect our land from foreign ownership. I've worked to protect children in libraries from what's going to happen. I've worked to make sure that we have true educational freedom and people can make their own decision. For me, it's fighting to let people make their own decision. Faceless bureaucrats, elected individuals will never know as much what's good for your life as you do. That's why we need to get rid of our state income tax and let people keep more of their money instead of taxing people for working and giving it to people that don't work. That's why I'm proud to say that if the elected officials running for this office, I've never voted to send your tax dollars to illegal immigrants. I'm glad that I can say that I've stood up for the people of this state, and I will continue to do that as your next governor.
Mr. Wright.
Well, when you go third and everybody has a lot of similar thoughts and feelings on, I agree with everything that they said, but one of the things that I'm going to bring into it is the 24 years of military service that I bring, and it's absolutely about defending the Constitution and giving the power to the people. And as governor, those are some of the things that I'm absolutely going to hold to the highest standard and priority.
All right, thank you very much. We're not going to do a rebuttal on that one. We are going to move to opening statements. And you'll have 3 minutes to provide this opening statement. You can use this time how you choose to define yourself and to differentiate yourself. Senator Bill Eigel, welcome to the debate. Your opening statement.
Well, thank you very much. And like I said, I talked a little bit about my background. I'm part of 4 generations of military service in my family, and that has really prepared me because I've actually been overseas. I've seen and been deployed as part of Operation Enduring Freedom back in 2004, what countries look like when big government dips into tyranny. I've seen what happens when the inflation takes hold because you have government that's out of control. It's been natural for me to push back against my nation's enemies. Well, unfortunately today, we have a lot of those enemies inside our borders, including inside our state. And they're represented right now by a status quo, a swamp as Donald J. Trump would call it, in Jefferson City that does not care about the fact that Missouri is stagnating. It does not care about the fact that we have a tax burden in this state per person that's twice what other big red states are paying and levying on their citizens. And because the status quo has become so powerful, the disappointment in Republicans who seem to join that status quo is growing every single day. I've put 70,000 miles on my truck, and I've met Republicans from every corner of this state that are frustrated, they're disappointed, they're angry. And if you find yourself as one of those Republicans, I want you to know that you're not alone. On August 6th, we're going to do something that the swamp cannot imagine. We're going to elect new leadership in this state, from the governor's office on down. And when we do that, we're going to get a Missouri that I know you want. You've been asking for it every other year on the first Tuesday in November. And the only thing standing in between us and that Missouri is the establishment that doesn't want to listen in Jefferson City. So I'm running on a platform of ideas that will move our state forward. I'm the only person in this race that's advocating for the elimination of personal property tax and income taxes. Yes, the tax burden is that big right now, and we've got a ton of waste down in Jefferson City. I'm the only one advocating to detain and deport every single one of the estimated 70,000 illegal immigrants that are in this state right now, actually costing us more than we collect in personal property tax. I'm the only one not only committed to stopping the sale of our farmland to any foreign country, I'm committed to a constitutional amendment that will get every square inch of land that we've lost to foreign entities back under American hands. And finally, I'm committed to go after the bureaucracies in Jefferson City that have stymied our education system. I'm going to go after the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And when we defund DESE, we're going to get better outcomes because we will no longer be taking all the federal dollars that are requiring our public schools to teach our children about this nonsense of transgenderism, this nonsense of CRT, and this outrageous ideology of DEI. That's the Missouri that I'm talking about. I've been talking about it for 2 years, and if you're interested in that Missouri, August 6th is the day that we're going to begin to take this state back.
Thank you, Senator Eigel. A 3-minute opening statement from Secretary Jay Ashcroft.
60 years ago this fall, Ronald Reagan gave a speech that he called "A Time for Changing." That's where we are today. That's what August 6th means. Because without the right choices on August 6th, we won't have good choices in November. Are we going to be the party that says we're for low taxes, or are we going to be the same party that passed the largest tax increase in the history of the state 3 years ago? Are we going to elect people that say they're in favor of smaller government, but on their watch, government has virtually doubled over 6 or 7 years? Are we going to be a people that say we believe in the values of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Or are we actually going to continue to elect people that say, well, we can make it easier for people to kill the unborn infant in the womb? If you don't stand up for life, there are no other values. There is no liberty. There is no pursuit of happiness. I'm not your typical engineer. I'm sorry. I get nervous in front of people. I am a typical engineer. I'm not your typical politician. I don't want to talk to people. I want to get stuff done. I want to act in the best interest of the people. I don't want to just talk about it when I'm running for election. I want to do it when it matters and move conservative policy forward. That's why I've been endorsed by Right to Life. That's why I've been endorsed by Vivek Ramaswamy. That's why I've been endorsed by former Governor Mike Huckabee. That's why, as Secretary of State, I took us from being ranked 11th in the nation with our elections to being in the top 3. That's when I saw a problem where investment advisors could take your money and invest it in woke ESG social agendas instead of getting you the most money. I made Missouri the only state in the country where that was illegal and we would come after you, because Missourians should be in charge of their money. And that's why, as governor, we will get rid of the state income tax. I've worked with Grover Norquist with Americans for Tax Reform. I've worked with the Heritage Foundation. I've worked with Dr. Laffer. We can do that, and we will do it. It's only $8.5 billion, and our government's grown by over $20 billion in the last 6 or 7 years. That's why I've pledged to put parents in charge of education. Bureaucrats don't know what's best for your children. You do. The money that goes to education should go into accounts for parents to spend it as they see fit, be that public school, private school, public charter schools, homeschooling, you name it. Moms and dads always know best. And finally, I'm committed to public safety. We need to put 1,000 new officers across the state in the first year. I've rolled out legislation that would give us truth in sentencing. So if you do the crime, you do the time. I've actually rolled out legislation that would make sure that we could get special prosecutors appointed if the prosecutor won't prosecute. And we need to change that to add the fact that we will get rid of prosecutors that won't prosecute it. I'm not just going to talk about things. I have a record of achieving conservative policy, and I will do it as your governor.
Thank you, Secretary Ashcroft. And the final opening statement from Mr. Chris Wright. It's where you're standing. Stand closer to the podium. No.
Here.
How's this?
Actually, that's good. That works well. No.
I think we're just going to have to do one microphone, but that's all right. So again, my name's Chris Wright. I'm from Joplin, Missouri. I want to thank the veterans, but also want to thank the teachers and the first responders who make our community safe and who teach our children. If you could also stand up and be recognized, please do so.
Teachers?
Thank you for what you do. My background isn't from politics. My background's 24-year combat veteran. I was in law enforcement for 9 years, and I've got 17 years as a small business owner. I own a construction company. I'm just your regular blue-collar guy. Everybody's sick and tired of politicians. Well, you literally have one standing right here in front of you who knows how to get things done, who knows how to lead people, who knows how to make those critical thinking decisions, who is not bought and paid for by the establishment. Go look at my Missouri Ethics Commission report. These are facts. We're going to change some things at the governor's office. Some of the things I want to work on, but before I do, you're going to hear a lot of promises by governor candidates. Not all of them, but here's the truth. The governor can't just do whatever he or she wants to do. Almost everything is done through the legislative body, so you've got to be able to work with your legislature. You just can't strong-arm your way through the legislature. You've got to be able to negotiate. I'm not saying compromise, but negotiate. Some of the things I want to work on, it's horrible no matter where you go. Crime doesn't care what color you are. Crime doesn't care what sexuality you are. Crime doesn't care what religion you are. Crime affects everybody. If it doesn't affect you personally, it'll affect your family. If it doesn't affect your family, it'll affect your business, your school. Second one I want to talk about is utility rates. If you're on Evergy, Ameren, the list, Liberty, you're getting decimated with your utility bills. The governor appoints the Public Service Commission Board. The Public Service Commission Board is who regulates these utilities. It's time we're going to put regular, everyday, hardworking Missourians on these boards, especially on that board. Next one, win or lose, I'm being an advocate for this. And it's human trafficking. Right now, Missouri is number 3 in the nation in human trafficking. Every man in here, please look at me. It is your absolute duty to take care of the women and children in your life. Women, keep your head on a swivel because human trafficking doesn't care about your age. Last one I want to talk about, single subject bills. We have a lot of good legislators who are trying to pass good legislation, but we also have a lot of bad legislators that are adding things to this bill, and I guess my time's up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chris Wright. All right, now we're going to move on to the questions. These are 90-second answers. We're going to start with Secretary Ashcroft because we began that first question with Senator Eigel. Secretary Ashcroft will answer it first, then Mr. Wright, then Senator Eigel. You each get 90 seconds to answer the initial question. We will go back through for a 60 seconds follow-up. Secretary Ashcroft, during the past 5 years under Republican leadership, Missouri has doubled its budget from $27 billion to $52 billion. What steps will you take as governor to address this rapid growth of government in Missouri?
Well, the best thing you can do as governor, and that's what I'm excited about, is that the governor has not only the line item veto, but the line item reduction veto. So as governor, when we see these really pork barrel programs that are put in there by senators and representatives, you can actually just line them out in the budget and say, no, we're not going to spend money on that. You can also take line items, and maybe there's some good in it, but it's not all good. You can actually reduce that amount. Instead of giving them, $5 million, you can say you're only going to get $2 million or you're only going to get $1 million. Also, as governor, you have the ability to make withholds depending on the economic situation. But the main thing that we have to do is we have to starve the beast. We don't have a problem with revenues. We have a problem with spending. And the core problem is government. The core problem is we have people that believe that government should do everything. I categorically reject that. As governor, I will focus on 3 things. 1, providing funding for education. It's required by our Missouri Constitution. Number 2, I think it's a fundamental responsibility of government to provide for roads, bridges, inland waterways. And what we've done with inland waterways is woefully inadequate. And number 3, public safety. Beyond that, I don't think government ought to be paying for it. And I think that's a great start to say, we'll do those 3 and give the money back to the people.
Thank you, Secretary Ashcroft. Mr. Chris Wright, $27 billion to $52 billion. What steps will you take as governor to address the rapid growth of government in Missouri?
It's the same thing because it's like Jay said, we don't have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem. And I agree 100% that our taxpayer money is supposed to go toward infrastructure, public safety, and education. But if you look at our budget, there are hundreds, if not thousands of things that are being funded by the budget. While I believe in helping people, but we can't handicap people. And I feel like this budget is handicapping a lot of people by not getting them to work on taking the steps to get on their own. And then on top of that, you have so much pork and fat in these budgets that it is absurd. And I'm not picking on my Branson friends, but there was a deal in there. And just last year's budget, $5 million for some research center. Hey, great, the birds are pretty, but that's not a taxpayer burden. And we have got to stop spending money on all these ridiculous things. And I've got a friend of mine who first started talking about this, and I really like the idea of a zero-based budget. And what that is instead of everything being automatic, last year we got $100 million, so this year we should get $200 million. No, go to a zero. Tell the legislature why you think you need taxpayer money for whatever funding it is.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. All right, final response on this one, Senator Eigel. The Missouri budget has doubled from $27 billion to $52 billion. What step, as governor, will you use to address this issue?
We're going to start submitting balanced budgets that are conservative in nature and build a coalition of Republicans to help fund the basic necessities of the state. The fact that our budget has grown and doubled in the past 5 years is a horrible reflection on our current governor. And it pains me to say that because the reality is he also won under the Republican brand. And we've been betraying Republicans in this state for a long time by making government so big, and our state is stagnating because of it. The difference between myself and the other candidates on this stage right now is that unlike the other two, I've been voting against these very budgets for the past 8 years on the floor of the Missouri Senate. I've been leading the fight against these bloated budgets. But right now, the conservative elements of the legislature are operating in a super minority. That's why, as the next governor, I'm going to make this commitment to you right now. In the first budget that I submit to the legislature in my first year of office, I will cut overall appropriations by 25%. I will cut federal appropriations by 40%. And the reason I can make those commitments and the others can't is because I know exactly where the bottom bodies are buried. I've been looking at it for the past 8 years. We're going to get rid of all of these earmarks that have made the budget into something I call making earmarks great again down in Jefferson City. We're going to get rid of a state workforce, or some of the state workforce, to right-size it and eliminate the thousands of positions that are empty right now, but you are paying for them anyway. That is a failure of fiscal leadership in this state. We're going to get rid of the $1 billion of waste that we found in our Medicaid program that has been there for years, and we've done nothing about it because the status quo is getting that money. And it's going to take somebody in this office that's willing to confront these special interests. I've made a habit of doing just that.
Senator Eigel, thank you. Secretary Ashcroft, you have up to 60 seconds for any sort of rebuttal or follow-up.
Well, the senator's right. I've never voted on those budgets, and I've actually never put earmarks in the budget. And we saw tens of billions of dollars of earmarks that he put into the budget that the governor vetoed this year because he put them into the budget, and then he voted against them so he could say that he didn't try to make our budget larger.
Mr. Wright, up to 60 seconds for follow-up.
I didn't vote on it because I'm not in the Senate or any part of the legislature. I'm next question. Yeah,
Senator Eigel gets an opportunity to follow up as well.
You're going to review what you just said.
The Secretary said that I have tens of billions of dollars in earmarks in the budget. I don't think that's the case. I think he is woefully mistaken. I've actually had one earmark that I put in that budget over the course of several years. It was $5 million to help provide clean drinking water in St. Charles City, and he's right, the governor vetoed that. It's amazing that we waste all this money and we couldn't find time for clean drinking water, and I'd be curious to know if the Secretary thinks that we shouldn't provide clean drinking water for the people in St. Charles City as well. I bet you he doesn't feel that way. So we're going to go with a chainsaw through this budget, and when we do, we're going to be able to get rid of personal property tax and income taxes and provide the Missouri that you've been waiting for years.
Thank you. Mr. Wright is going to have the opportunity to answer the next question here first. We are going to introduce another microphone to make this less aerobic. You can give it to the senator there. Although,
we're getting our steps in.
Is she doing great or is she doing great?
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Wright, you get 90 seconds to answer this question, followed by Senator Eigel and Secretary Ashcroft. The voters must have confidence that our elections are free and fair. How do we ensure that our future elections are free from fraud? What will you do to protect them? And with your first part of your response, do you believe that the 2020 general election was stolen?
Yes, the 2020 election was stolen. I've seen the facts. I used to be, I'm one of those guys where there's smoke, there's fire, but also being former law enforcement, I like to see evidence, and I did a deal with Dr. Franks, and if you don't know who he is, he's a researcher. He showed me the evidence, so I absolutely believe, yeah, let's just get together.
Yeah. Nobody bites. Nobody bites. Somebody's afraid of what you have to say, Mr. Wright. That's what it seems like.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So yes, I believe it was stolen. The second part, if I remember, was asking about what I'm going to do about stolen elections. So you got to work with the Secretary of State. You got to work with your county clerks to make sure that they are providing the secure elections. I know it's not you. It's this microphone is throwing me. I'm sorry. This thing is throwing me off. Simply short, I'm going to use my influence to work with the necessary parties that take care of that.
Thank you. Senator Eigel, how do we ensure that our future elections are free from fraud? What will you do to protect them? And with your first part of your response, do you believe that the 2020 general election was stolen?
Yes, of course it was. In fact, I like to say that the swamp won that election because they got in office the guy that they wanted, that they could control. And we're still paying for that every single day. We actually did a few of the things that I consider low-hanging fruit in the legislature to help make our elections a little bit better. We passed a bill that required a photo ID to be used. I'm the only one on this stage that voted for that bill. The same bill got rid of Zuckerbucks. The same bill got rid of the drop boxes. I'm the only one on this stage that fought for and voted for that bill on this stage. But if we really want to be serious about getting our elections back, we're going to have to get rid of all these Joe Biden voting machines. I mean, that's what it comes down to. And I think that I'm pretty sure I'm the only one on this stage that is committed to getting rid of these voting machines and going back to the hand counting of ballots that's worked for this state for more than 100 years. I have filed legislation on this, and when the legislation was heard in committee, I didn't have a single statewide office holder show up and support that legislation. So if you want to truly get control of your elections back, I'm really the only choice because I've taken a stance that's going to not allow our elections to continue to be vulnerable.
Thank you, Senator. Secretary Ashcroft, how do we ensure that our future elections are free from fraud? What will you do to protect them? And with your first response, do you believe that the 2020 general election was stolen?
Yeah, it was messed up. You look at Pennsylvania, look at Arizona, look at Georgia, look at Wisconsin. No one with a straight face can look at that election and say that was fair and properly run. I'm glad to say that we can say that it was properly run in Missouri. I don't know why it works for me and not you. I'm sorry. And I'm glad that after years of effort, the bill that I helped write, I was able to get the Senate to pass it. And we did outlaw Zuckerbucks. We outlawed drop boxes. We made the paper ballot the official ballot of the state. We finally implemented a government-issued photo ID requirement that the Senate had tried to do for years and years and years. And generally, they would just trade it away for Democrats for something else. So I'm glad that we've moved from 11th in the country, according to Heritage Foundation, to the 3rd in the nation. I tried to get hand-marked paper ballots as part of that. It was rejected by the Senate, and I hope that they will move on that. But what do we need to do for the future? Well, one of the things that I've been trying to get them to do, and they've refused to do, is require proof of citizenship for people that want to register and people that want to vote. That is the only way to make sure that illegal aliens and illegal immigrants are not voting in our elections. It's common sense. We should do that. We should also overhaul our audits. There is no reason that we just have a 5% hand count audit and that's all we do. And the Senate, unfortunately, has refused to put a requirement that audits be hand counted in the legislation. We will do that, and we'll also make it so that voter registrations expire and that we no longer accept the federal registration form. Thank you.
Secretary Ashcroft, thank you. Mr. Wright, you have up to 60 seconds for a follow-up.
No, it all sounds good.
Good, okay, thank you.
I'm not here to talk.
The microphone is working right now if you've got more to say. Senator Eigel, 60 seconds, up to 60 seconds for a follow-up.
Well, I tell you, the bill in question that we passed, a lot of that low-hanging fruit was House Bill 1878, and I have heard the Secretary talk a lot about how he was instrumental, but I got to tell you guys, I was actually out on the floor voting for that bill, fighting for that bill, and the Secretary wasn't there. And I think that that's pretty common for politicians to actually do that. I've been confronting the swamp for 8 years. And actually, as an added assessment of this, I think there's somebody else that hasn't been very helpful when it comes to election integrity, but he didn't have the guts to show up tonight. I mean, even Joe Biden showed up to the debates, but it's unfortunate that he can't be here. So,
Secretary Ashcroft, up to 60 seconds for a follow-up.
You know, I think the number one thing we need in our elected officials is integrity. And Senator Eigel knows exactly where I was when that bill was being discussed on the floor of the Senate. It was my wife's birthday. I was supposed to take a day of vacation, and I was in the meeting room just off the floor of the Senate with the senators that were debating and figuring out what they would pass. And you actually came in and asked me to help you get some stuff added to that bill. I'm glad that I was able to provide leadership and get that done. I'm sorry that we haven't had the leadership in our Senate to do more, but as governor, I will make sure that we do.
Thank you, Secretary Ashcroft. The first question is going to come to Senator Eigel. You get the first opportunity to respond. This one comes from voters Jackie S. and Paul A. There is growing concern among Missouri voters about taxes. What would you do, if anything, regarding the gas tax increase and the state income tax?
Yes, absolutely. Well, first of all, I think we need to understand that all taxes are too high. There isn't a single tax in existence right now in the state of Missouri that doesn't need to be cut. I've made a commitment that we're going to start with personal property tax because I think that we should be able to own our cars instead of paying rent for them every December 1st. I am the only candidate in this race that has taken the position that we're going to free our working and middle income class households from the scourge of personal property tax. 29 other states have already gotten rid of personal property tax. Under an Eigel administration, we will be the 30th. And remember, nothing in this state, and no problem in this state has anything to do with the taxpayers not sending enough of their cash to government somewhere. So when we cut the budget, like I've described, we're not only going to get rid of personal property tax, we're going to get rid of income taxes. I would sign a bill to repeal the Mike Kehoe gas tax every day of the week and twice on Sunday, but all the taxes are too high. And right now, to tell you just how out of touch Jefferson City is, they're not talking about this problem. They're not talking about personal property taxes. They're not talking about income tax cuts. They're talking about how we can give $1 billion of your dollars to the billionaire owners of the Kansas City Chiefs and Kansas City Royals right now. And I can left to wonder, is $18 for a hot dog not enough for these billionaire owners? I got to tell you, the next $1 billion that we find in Jefferson City isn't going to go into the status quo of the powerful, of those special interests. It's going to go into cutting your personal property tax. Let's go, Missouri.
Thank you, Senator Eigel. Secretary Ashcroft, what would you do, if anything, regarding the gas tax increase and the state income tax?
With the gas tax, it was outrageous. The people of the state 3 times over about 10 years had voted down something similar. I will call on the legislature to get rid of it, but if they don't, I'm actually an attorney and an engineer, and I believe there's a way that the governor can unilaterally get rid of it by vetoing the refund mechanism for the Department of Revenue, which would make that tax unconstitutional, and we could get rid of it without even the legislature voting on it by going to court. And if the legislature does not repeal it, I will veto funding for the refunds, which I believe will violate Hancock, and we will get rid of the gas tax that way. It is wrong. I have actually had legislators introduce legislation. I signed a taxpayer bill of rights. I don't believe there should ever be I don't think there should ever be a tax increase because we've got plenty of money. But I also secondarily don't believe there should ever be a tax increase unless the people of this state vote on it at a November general election. If I'm not around, maybe they can do that. If I'm around, I'll veto it. But secondly, we've got to cut spending, and we've got to have an understanding that we put a limit on how much government can spend. So I'll get rid of the state income tax. I've talked about that. I will get rid of the gas tax. I can do that unilaterally. And then thirdly, with the taxpayer bill of rights, we need to do something that Colorado did. And I normally don't talk about Colorado because they've turned blue. But they put it in their constitution that if the state tries to spend more than the people have said it can spend, they either have to get the approval of the people at a general election or they have to turn the money back to the people. And I think we set a low limit and make sure all that extra money goes back to the people every year.
Secretary Ashcroft, thank you. Mr. Wright, what would you do, if anything, regarding the gas tax increase and the state income tax?
Very simple, repeal it. The people didn't want it, and for some reason our great governor decided that we needed to have it. It's a crime. We are taxed to death, just like we're all going to say we're taxed to death, taxed to death. I personally like the idea of a consumption tax over anything because you have to have some form of taxation for basic governmental use. So I'm not going to say I want all taxes gone. I would love that, but then we would have anarchy going on in this world. So I'm big on consumption tax. I do want to clarify, it was said that I don't support getting rid of personal property tax, but my announcement video almost 2 years ago says I do support getting rid of personal property tax. However, I don't support it unless that money is replaced somehow, or if there's some sort of guarantee kick in to where the local schools, the local fire, the libraries aren't going to be eroded from not having that budgeting, that money.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Senator Eigel, up to 60 seconds for a follow-up.
Well, I want to be clear that when we talk about cutting taxes, the intention is not just to replace it with another tax that we're going to stab you in the back with somewhere else. So we're going to cut the tax burden. That's what's going to make Missouri grow. And actually, I am familiar with the proposal that the Secretary mentioned about Colorado's Taxpayer Bill of Rights. The reason I know about that is because I have filed and sponsored that legislation every single year I've been in the Senate. But when the status quo in the swamp would kill that bill after I presented it in committee, I never had a single statewide office holder, including the Secretary, show up to express his support for that. And yet here we are in campaign season, and he wants to talk about how that's something he would do. Here's what we're going to do, folks. We're going to cut government by a whole bunch. And when we do, Missouri's going to take its place alongside the Tennessees, the Texases, and the Floridas of the world. And a couple years from now, there's going to be a gubernatorial debate in another red state far from here, and one of the candidates is going to say, how can we be more like the Show Me state? Let's go, Missouri.
Secretary Ashcroft, 60 seconds to follow up.
You know, the real problem is that the gas tax passed in the first place. And what really makes me mad is we had Republicans that could filibuster and issue a petition reform, but they couldn't filibuster the largest tax increase in the history of the state. And you're right, I didn't vote for the gas tax. I didn't vote against it because I wasn't in the Senate. But I did work the hallways trying to convince people not to push it. I did outline a path for certain third-party organizations to put it to a referendum and put it to a vote of the people. And if I had been in the state Senate, I would not have sat down because it's wrong to do that. And it's unfortunate that we have so many people in the Senate that can filibuster for all sorts of reasons. But when it comes to protecting your pocketbook, they fell silent.
Secretary Ashcroft, thank you. Mr. Wright, up to 60 seconds for a follow-up.
Again, there's no rebuttal. We've already covered all of this. I'm not here to fight with anybody. Let's keep answering questions.
Next question to Secretary Jay Ashcroft. Secretary Ashcroft, this question comes from Becky A. What do you think of the health care provided to our veterans? As governor, what would you do to improve the health care provided to our veterans?
I think it's a disgrace how we're treating our veterans. We made a promise. In any other occupation, if you are hurt on the job, your employer pays for that. We have veterans that were promised free health care. They're not getting it. They earned it. They're having to travel farther. They're having to pay for it. They're not getting the mental health care that they should get. It's frankly morally repugnant. And, you know, beyond that, look at what we pay active duty individuals. We have active duty individuals that are actually on public assistance because their families don't make enough from them signing a blank check to Uncle Sam to be able to support their families. And it's not just with like health care and things like that, but let's talk about Missouri's veterans homes. It's a good thing. It's a promise we make to our veterans. We have veterans that are having to wait 2 or 3 years to get in those homes. And yet our budgets, which have doubled essentially in the last 7 years, don't even provide enough money to keep all of those homes open for the next 3 years. We are tens of millions of dollars in errors for supporting those veterans' homes. And what really gets me miffed is every 2 years we hear about gadgets and special things. We just need to every year take care of our veterans and make sure we're thankful for them. They were there for us. We should be there for them. And frankly, I'd be pretty disgusted with myself if I had been in the legislature and decided to cut the veterans' home funding by tens of millions of dollars.
Secretary Ashcroft, thank you for your answer. Mr. Wright, Becky's question. What do you think of the health care provided to our veterans? And as governor, what would you do to improve the health care provided to our veterans?
So as a veteran, I see it a lot, but our current health care that's provided is garbage. It's slow, it's untimely, it takes forever. And some of the biggest complaints that I hear is there's a lot of soldiers who are waiting for the VA, the Veterans Affairs, to kick in. And they're having to wait long times. And I will ask the legislature to implement money into the budget if I can't do it on my own to provide, you know, these facilities, especially in the rural areas. And I know that's not big here, but there are a lot of Missouri. It's about 80% rural. So there's a lot going on other than the St. Louis area. But it goes for everybody. Make it more accessible to where they're not having to wait. And a lot of times what doesn't get mentioned is they're waiting on money also, you know. So there's got to be a way that we can get these veterans not only health care, but money so that they can pay their bills, so they can have gas in the car to go to their appointments, and really stop making such red tape bureaucracy to get the health care they need. They need to have it a lot more easier instead of making it so difficult, and I'll vow to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Senator Eigel, what do you think of the health care provided to our veterans? And as governor, what would you do to improve the health care provided to our veterans?
Well, we need to restore the funding to our veterans home, and this is personal for me because before I got into politics, I actually volunteered at one of the veterans homes right here in St. Louis. So I know many of those residents personally, and military service is always going to be special for me and every veteran in this state. And I'm not going to take any criticism from anybody on this stage that actually stood in a forum and said that veterans benefits wasn't good government. So I'll appreciate the feedback, but no thanks. And I'll tell you, I want to go back to what was said about the filibuster on the gas tax. You're right. I filibustered for 5 hours on the Senate floor, more than anybody else on this stage. And I did sit down because we were told by our leadership that if we sat down, we would get the Second Amendment Preservation Act done, which we did less than 48 hours. That was the kind of choices senators would have to make. And if the secretary thinks that he was willing to sit down on that, then I guess he wasn't willing to see the Second Amendment Preservation Act done. But this is the problem. Where were our statewide leaders? Where were our statewide leaders pushing the legislature to pass both of those things, kill the gas tax and pass SEPA? Where was our statewide leadership? Perhaps Jay actually was in the hallways during that, but unfortunately, no one listens to him. So when we were out there fighting and dying on the Senate floor to actually get these things done or to stop the bad legislation, I've stopped more bad legislation because I've been willing to confront the swamp on the Senate floor than either of my two opponents could even imagine happens in the first place. Let's go, Missouri.
Senator Eigel, thank you for your response. Secretary Ashcroft, up to 60 seconds for follow-up.
You know, once again, we hear things that just aren't true. What I said was that the law should treat everyone equally. We made promises to our veterans, and we should uphold those promises. Just like anyone else that's hurt in the line of duty, anyone else that's been promised something, we need to take care of them. And it's fully appropriate for people to give special benefits to veterans because of what they've done for us. My brother, 11 days ago, became a captain in the Navy. I understand a little bit what it's like. He came up through the hawse pipe. He wasn't an officer at the beginning. He started off as enlisted. He worked his way up. And he needs to know that the people of this state and the people of this country will back him and understand the service that he has provided. And let's just be honest. I've always supported veterans, and, well, that's all there's to say.
Secretary, thank you. Mr. Wright, up to 60 seconds for a follow-up.
So one thing that may not come as a direct to the question, but it still involves the health of veterans. It's service members altogether. So about 3 or 4 years ago, the federal government pushed down a mandate, a COVID vaccine mandate, and I didn't have anybody backing me as a soldier to whenever I was telling the government no, because we all know that wasn't a vaccine, that was a shot. And as governor, that man or woman has to be the forefront on stopping the federal government, especially against something like a vaccine that doesn't even work. And it just really infuriated me, and it really made me jaded toward the government, because whenever I was fighting by myself, where was anybody in my legislature? And this is not a knock on Bill. In my legislature, where was my lieutenant governor? Where was my governor fighting for me?
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Up to 60 seconds for a follow-up. Senator Eigel.
Yes, so before they took my chairmanship for fighting too hard for initiative petition reform, I was the chairman of the Veterans Committee in the Missouri Senate. We heard bills helping our veterans and our National Guard members for more than a year and a half while I was there. And in every committee hearing that we heard bills that were going to protect them from these COVID-19 shots. We heard bills that were going to get rid of taxes on the signing bonuses for National Guard members, that were going to force funding of our Missouri veterans homes. Not in one of those meetings, not one meeting in a year and a half did I ever see the secretary, did I ever see anybody on this stage, did I ever see no-show Kehoe. This has been a consistent pattern of absence, and now to hear these individuals talk about these things because we're in the midst of a gubernatorial campaign is reprehensible. We didn't just start being campaign conservatives. I am the same person I've always promised I would be in campaign season. That's why the swamp hates me. That's why we're going to have a reckoning in Jefferson City after August 6th.
Senator Eigel, thank you. Our next question is going to begin with Mr. Wright. We've heard grave concern from Missourians over foreign ownership of Missouri land. Is this a real concern? And if so, what do you intend to do about it? This question from Paul R. and Mark J.
Of course it's a concern. As a guy who's been in the military 24 years, there are countries out there that want to get the United States, and especially China, because I know that's the popular country to talk about. China has put out the 100-year plan. It is no secret what China wants to do to America. And we've got, I don't know what the number is, but it's 1 acre too many. And again, coming from the military, I absolutely don't want any of our foreign adversaries owning anything in Missouri. There's really just no more to debate about. The answer is China, all these countries that are adversaries do not belong in the United States or Missouri, period.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Senator Eigel, the question from Paul and Mark.
Well, this is an issue that's gotten a lot of attention in this campaign, and this is an issue that before 2013 wasn't an issue because it was illegal to buy for foreign entities to buy land in Missouri before 2013 until Mike Kehoe voted to allow more than 270,000 acres to be sold to foreign countries. It was to facilitate a deal to Smithfield Foods, who was bought out by a Chinese conglomerate. You want to know why he's not here tonight? Because he can't answer that question. And he knows that when he shows up, we're all going to find out that he's actually a Democrat. So I have actually been working to stop the sale of our land to China and all foreign countries. I'm the only one in this race that opposes our land being sold to any foreign countries, and I'm the only one in this race that has spoken out in favor and will support a constitutional amendment to get every square inch of ground we've lost back. Every square inch. Missouri ought to be owned by Missourians or at least Americans. And I'll tell you what, this year in the Missouri Senate, the much maligned Missouri Senate, we actually passed language that I inserted into Senate Bill 912 that would have prohibited any foreign entity from owning land in this state within 500 miles of a military installation. It got taken out in the House. As governor, we're going to get that done, and if the legislature doesn't get it done in the regular session, they'll be in the special session until Christmas time, making sure we protect our farmers.
Senator Eigel, thank you. Secretary Ashcroft, concerning Missourians worried about foreign ownership of Missouri land, is it a real concern, and what do you intend to do about it?
It is a real concern. It's why I worked to introduce Senate Bill 55 that would have prohibited any foreign entity from owning or leasing any land, not just agricultural land in our state. Unfortunately, the Senate refused to let it out of committee. It's a 2.5-page bill, less than that. You can read it. Make sure you read the last paragraph. That's where the special sauce is. Secondly, when that didn't work, I helped write House Bill 903, which would have specifically excluded China and 4 or 5 other enemy nations, antagonistic nations from buying any land in our state. It also would have created a mechanism to review any potential sales that would go through the Secretary of State's office and the Attorney General's office to make sure that we were following the law. It passed the House, it made it to the Senate, and unfortunately, the individual to the right of me voted to allow any foreign government to buy as much land as they want in our state and even to use it to do genetic testing on humans. It's Senate substitute for House Bill 903. Read the very last section.
Secretary, thank you. Mr. Wright, up to 60 seconds for a follow-up.
So everybody's looking at me like I'm going to say something crazy. So I'll just be straight up. When you put things in writing, it really shows a lot of character and a lot of truth. And if you go to my social media in January, I believe, of 2023, I'm holding a pig on my buddy's hog farm, talking against the ownership of foreign land in Missouri. So I just want to put that out there.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Senator Eigel, up to 60 seconds for your follow-up.
I've been filing this legislation to do this for a couple years now, and I know that it's tempting to say that this is really just getting politicized, but we've been fighting this, and actually the Senate has taken more action on this, and no, that is not the case, that we were opening up farmland. Not a single senator would vote for such a thing. Even the moderate rhinos wouldn't even vote for that. So we know that's not the case. What we're lacking on this is really action by the 2 individuals that are most responsible for this mess that voted for it as state senators, Mike Parson and Mike Kehoe. Both of those guys not only voted for it as state senators, they overrode the governor at the time to ensure that it became law. So instead of talking about what you think everybody did in that case, why don't we just all agree that all foreign countries shouldn't own our land, and let's focus on getting the land back.
Thank you, Senator Eigel. Secretary Ashcroft, up to 60 seconds for a follow-up.
I would just invite anyone who wants, go grab Senate Bill 55 from 2023, get HB 903 from 2023, and the Senate substitute for HB 903. This problem would have been solved. We would have stopped foreign entities from buying any land in our state. If we just would have passed Senate Bill 55, we would have prohibited China and 4 or 5 other countries from buying any land in our state if HB 903 would have been passed. It's time we get past people that say one thing but do another.
Thank you, Secretary Ashcroft. Senator Eigel will get our next question first. This is from Heather L. and voter June. How will you make public school districts accountable for the taxpayer funding they receive, and do you support school choice?
Yeah, great question. I do support school choice. I've actually been the sponsor of the charter school expansion bill in the Missouri Senate every year I've been there. I've voted yes on every bill to come before the Missouri Senate body on school choice. So again, I think there's a lot of folks talking about school choice, but I'm the only one that's actually done it. I've also say, though, that in addition to school choice, we also need to break up the bureaucracies that we have down in Jefferson City that are stifling our local public school districts. I'm talking about the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. You can't have one or the other, folks. You can't try to expand choice, but not get rid of the stifling bureaucracy in Jefferson City. I'm the one that have seen these bureaucracies play out year after year after year. They've gotten bigger. They've gotten stronger. They're shuffling this money from the federal government down to local public school districts that are coming with mandates to teach our children things that nobody in this room thinks is a good idea. It's going to take a leader that will confront the special interests that are pushing these things to take them out of the budget, line item veto if the legislature tries to put it back in, even if it's from Republican legislators, or we'll go after and dismantle DESE so that we can get our schools back. So yes on both counts.
Thank you, Senator Eigel. Secretary Ashcroft, how will you make public school districts accountable for taxpayer funding they receive, and do you support school choice?
I support true school choice. And if you do not dismantle DESE and put parents in charge of what happens in schools, all you have is the choice of your mascot. You don't have the choice of making sure that your children are appropriately taught. 6 years ago, I started a legislative retreat on education to try to push forward ideas on releasing the potential of our children and putting parents in charge. You've got to get government out of it. Bureaucrats don't know better than moms and dads. We need to take the money that's going to schools. We need to put it into an education savings account for parents. They can use it for their public school tuition if they like that school. They can use it for homeschooling. They can use it for public charter schools. They can use it however they want to educate their children. The problem with public education right now is government being involved. We need the local control. That's mom and dad. That's the best form of government. They should decide the values that the children are taught. They should decide the teachers that teach their children. And when it comes right down to it, right now in Missouri, fewer than 25% of Missouri 8th graders are proficient in math and reading. That is morally repugnant, and it's time for talk to end, and it's time for us to put the money in parents' hands and get real change in this state.
Thank you, Secretary Ashcroft. Mr. Wright, how will you make public school districts accountable for taxpayer funding and they receive, and do you support school choice?
Yes, so whenever I say I support school choice, you've got to remember I support it with certain parameters. You could literally put anything into a bill right now and attach it to school choice. So I do love the idea of parents being in charge of their children, just like Mr. Ashcroft said. This is a no-brainer. As far as the funding, what was the second part of the question?
Regarding holding school districts accountable for their taxpayer funding or school choice.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of like with the charter school. You know, if you're not performing as a school, then you should have that threat of money being taken away, because if that money is going to the school for betterment and you can't do your job, then why are you getting that money? You know, we need to create competition. When you start creating competition, that's when things get better. And this mic is not liking me still.
It's doing better. It's doing better. All right, Senator Eigel, you have up to 60 seconds for a follow-up.
Yes, I think that based on the answers we're given here, I think there's pretty broad agreement on the issue of education choice and defunding the bureaucracies down in Jefferson City. I think that what sticks out in my mind is the difference between myself and the other two candidates is I've been in the Missouri Senate voting this way for 8 years, and it is time for more talk. But right now, I'm the only one with a proven track record of voting for these issues, voting against the budget bills that actually funded these bureaucracies, leading the super minority of Republicans in the Missouri Senate that were against the bad proposals and for the good proposals. I'm the one with the experience. I'm the one with the proven record. I mean, the American Conservative Union actually rated me as the second most conservative Missouri senator to ever serve in the Missouri Senate in modern history, second only to Congressman Eric Burleson. I'm proud of that. And that came from 8 years of experience dealing with and working against this bureaucracy, the status quo in Jefferson City. So when I talk about defunding it, when I talk about getting rid of the control that DESE is placing, I've been there, I've done that. We've got a long way to go.
Senator Eigel, thank you. Secretary Ashcroft, up to 60 seconds for a follow-up.
Let me just say the most important thing is that who holds the schools accountable? It should not be government. It should be parents. Because education should be about whether or not children are learning and being taught to think. It should not be about the size of buildings or gymnasiums. Government is the wrong person to do that. We need parents in charge of that. I've been talking about that for 6 years. I've been moving that forward, and as governor, I will make sure it happens. Thank you.
Secretary, thank you. Mr. Wright, up to 60 seconds for your follow-up.
I don't need 60 seconds. Again, I'm not in the legislature, but, you know, to reiterate, we've got to get more local control. We've got to get more people involved, not just in these big races, but those local races in April when you're electing school board members, when you're electing these type of people, because they can go in and advocate on that level, and we've got to be proactive in doing that.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Secretary Ashcroft will be the first to answer our next question. Missouri voters are concerned with the perceived corruption in Jefferson City. Is Jefferson City corrupt? And if so, how will you overcome it?
I tell you what, it sure
You get
looks
90
like
seconds.
It sure looks like there are a lot of people making decisions based on who's funding their campaigns. And, you know, there's probably a reason why there's someone missing. If you look at his MEC filings and you look at the budget, you'll understand why. First of all, you need to cut off the money. You have to cut off the money by cutting state income tax and getting rid of that. As a governor, you have to use the line item veto. You have to get out in front and be willing to veto bills and say that the purpose of government funding is education under a constitution, roads, bridges, inland waterways, and public safety, and nothing else. And let me just go back. I talked about the Tabor. The best way to help get government spending under control is to put it to a vote of the people. Because I'm pretty sure if people are allowed to decide, do you want the government to be able to spend more? No. All right, you guys are a little slow. Or do you want the extra money to go back to the taxpayers of Missouri? Yes. I will make sure that that appears on the ballot and the people of the state will vote. I will campaign for it. Because government is supposed to be limited by the people and government is supposed to serve the people. That is not happening, and we need to hold people accountable, and we need to quit finding legislators that are doing a bad job and appointing them to boards and commissions as a reward. We need to reward good behavior, and we need to punish bad behavior.
Secretary Ashcroft, thank you. Mr. Wright, Missouri voters are concerned with perceived corruption in Jefferson City. Is Jefferson City corrupt? And if so, how will you overcome it?
Absolutely, it's corrupt. I mean, I'm sorry. Yes, it is corrupt. And again, it's like Jay said, go look at a Missouri Ethics Commission. Follow the money. The legislature made a decent attempt with making limits to how much you can contribute to a individual campaign. You want to make a real difference in politics and get real people that aren't bought and paid for? Get rid of the PACs. This is not rocket science. This is not difficult, but yet doing the same thing over and over and over. Sorry, I will go down a rabbit hole on this one, but I'm not going to. But yes, it's corrupt, and we've got to do something with the money and how it's so easy to fund these PACs with like $10 million. What are you going to do with $10 million? You know who I'm talking about.
Mr. Wright, thank you. Senator Eigel, is Jefferson City corrupt? And if so, how would you overcome it?
Yeah, of course it's corrupt. I think everybody knows that. I think that's why people are frustrated. Go back to the conversation we were having about whether or not the billionaire owners of the Chiefs or Royals ought to be getting $1 billion for a shiny new sports stadium. Of course it is. It caters to the powerful. And I don't take away anything from the secretary because he's right. We should pass something like Tabor. I've been sponsoring it for years. But you know what we really need more than anything else, more than a constitutional amendment, more than more laws that are going to try to restrict government? We just need Republicans that will act like Republicans. That's what we need. And right now, we don't have anybody in statewide office that is willing to do the tough thing and confront the status quo. You know, I take a lot of heat because a lot of people say, well, you know, Bill Eigel, he's kind of an aggressive guy. He's meanie down there. You know what? They're right. My intention is to confront the swamp. I'm going to unite the Republican Party by calling on them to do Republican things and holding them accountable in front of you if they don't. Now, we also don't have to wait for anything else when it comes to the budget. The governor recommends the budget. He has line item veto authority. He has withhold authority. And he has control of every one of those executive branches where all the waste is in the first place. We need a governor that's going to go in there and tell the special interests that which they don't hear enough. No. I have made a habit, and everyone knows it, of making the swamp uncomfortable for 8 years in the state Senate. I'm going to do exactly that as your governor for the next 4.
Thank you, Senator Eigel. Secretary Ashcroft, up to 60 seconds for a follow-up.
You know, when it comes right down to it, I don't trust that the people we elect in 20 years will do the right thing. And I don't think anybody in this room believes that they can trust that who is elected in 20 years will do the right thing. I know that I will do the right thing for 8 years. But if I really want to make a difference for future generations in this state, I'm going to handcuff the people that come behind me so that they cannot grow government the way they might want to, so that they have to return that money and not take it in the first place from the people of this state. Some people may believe that people are inherently good and you can always expect to have good people elected to office. I don't think anybody in here really believes that. For 8 years, I can make sure that we cut our budget, that we return the people money back to them. But I will for darn sure make sure that whoever follows me has to do the same thing because it's written in the Constitution, and I believe that the people of this state will protect that.
Secretary.
At the end,
Good. 60 seconds to follow up. Go for it.
At the end of the day, it's up to the voters. You gotta wade through all the campaign candy. You got to do a little bit of your own research. I know that's hard for some, but you've got to do it. And you got to stop electing the same people in these jobs, and you got to stop promoting the people that aren't doing their job into a higher position. Just look at me for this example. I have dedicated my entire life of serving the public. I don't do it for fame. I don't do it for money. I have my own money. You've got to stop looking at the commercials, the social media. Start looking at your candidates and researching who they are. What kind of character do they have? What are they about? Who do they volunteer for? What do they do to make the public better outside of the limelight?
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Senator Eigel, up to 60 seconds for a follow-up.
Listen, I'll say again, I'm supportive of any additional restrictions we want to put in the Constitution. But if that is your hope, if that is your plan, keep in mind, how many politicians do we have in Jefferson City and Washington, D.C. that don't follow the Constitution now? What we need in this state is leadership from Republicans and Republicans to do Republican things. Listen, it's not that other states, other big red states like Tennessee and Texas and Florida don't have rhinos here and there in their legislature, that they don't have moderates in their legislature that if given half an opportunity would betray those GOP principles. The difference between Missouri and those other states is that those states have a bold conservative leader that's willing to set a visionary agenda, and you bet those governors are willing to confront the status quo in their state with the backing of the people. The difference between me and the other candidates is not that they're saying the wrong things, but I've already been that person confronting the status quo in Jefferson City. I'm ready to take the bullets and slings and arrows on behalf of every one of the 6 million people that live here, and we are going to be a leader in these United States.
Senator Eigel, thank you. The next question starts with Mr. Wright. Missouri uses targeted tax incentives in an attempt to attract business to the state. Do you agree with targeted tax incentives, and how would you attract new business to Missouri?
I agree with taxes in that manner if we're going to get a return on our investment. And if we're bringing in businesses and work and building the economic development, then I do like the idea of it. But again, everything's got to have stipulations. Sorry, there's something gross on there. I keep it that simple. I love the idea of investing if we're going to get something in return, because again, it's the taxpayer money. It's not Uncle Sam's money. It's not the government's money. It's our money. And as governor, I will always vow to do the right thing and take that thought process into accountability in making all decisions.
Mr. Wright, thank you. Senator Eigel, do you agree with targeted tax incentives, and how would you attract new businesses to Missouri?
No, I don't agree with targeted tax incentives. Those businesses don't deserve any benefit from government that every single citizen in the state is not getting. In fact, guess who's getting those targeted incentives right now? Big, powerful corporations. It's not the small businesses in this state that those targeted tax incentives are being passed for. They're being passed on behalf of the special interests, and there's nothing more swampy than these targeted tax incentives. How are we going to get our state growing? By reducing the tax burden for everybody. You know what Tennessee and Texas and Florida don't have? They don't have personal property tax. You know what those states don't have? They don't have income taxes. And they've been able to do it because they're spending less than half per person to provide the same services in those states of what we're doing in this state. Where were the fiscal conservatives we were promised in campaign season as Republicans that would have put a stop to this nonsense? Our governor has grown government more in 6 years than every Democratic governor combined going back to the founding of the state. And the reason that Mike Kehoe isn't here tonight is because he doesn't have the courage to stand in front of you and admit that he would just be more of the same, because he is the status quo. So we're going to continue to talk about these ideas until August 6th, and then we're actually going to go get the Missouri that's going to compete with and put to shame all the other big red states in these United States.
Senator Eigel, thank you. Secretary Ashcroft, do you agree with targeted tax incentives, and how would you attract new business to Missouri?
So you're asking me if I think it ought to be okay for the government to take your money, give part of it back to you, but tell you how you have to spend it, and expect you to thank them for giving part of your money back to you? No, I'm not in favor of targeted tax incentives. I believe the law should apply equally to everyone. That's why with what I want to do with the state income tax, I want to take it down to zero so that there is no personal income tax. Your tax dollars should not be used by the government to grow revenues for the government. Your tax dollars should be kept in your wallet, and you should use them however you see fit. Put them in the bank, go to the football game, buy a movie, get a pizza. It's your money. The problem is we have too many people in Jefferson City that don't believe it's your money, and they think they know better than you do how to spend it. It's been going on far too long. As governor, I will stop it. It's why I came out a long time ago against public funding of stadiums. My dad wasn't really happy about it because this was back in the 80s when he was in favor of it for the St. Louis Rams. But your tax dollars and your money should be used as you see fit, not as bureaucrats in government see fit.
Thank you, Secretary. Mr. Wright, up to 60 seconds for a follow-up.
So I'm going to stand before you as a human. I honestly was mistaken on what we were talking about, and I apologize for that. I don't know everything, and I thought we were talking about something else, but knowing now the corrected version of that, yeah, these guys are right. It doesn't belong. It doesn't belong in our government, and they shouldn't be the ones. I made a mistake, and I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Wright.
On that one? Oh, we changed his mind. All right.
Senator Eigel, a follow-up
All
was
right.
your work here done.
See, you can learn something even in a public debate. Way to go, Chris. No, I tell you, and by the way, Jay, be a little easy on your dad. You need that last name. I tell you, I agree with most everything that was said by both of my opponents here, but the difference between myself and the other two is, again, while they're talking about it, I've actually done it. In spite of my reputation as being kind of an ultra right-wing guy down in Jefferson City, I actually sponsored and passed House Bill 2540 in my second year in the Missouri Senate. That reduced the income tax from 5.9% down to 5.4%. I did that. I've been voting for these tax cut bills my entire 8 years. I've been fighting against tax increases. In fact, one of those special taxing districts that got through the Senate was the General Motors incremental tax financing that sent $75 million. I actually stood on the Senate floor and filibustered for 27 hours along with the other conservatives in the Senate. And you know how they got us to sit down? They told us that if we didn't sit down, they wouldn't pass the heartbeat bill. This is what's going on, and a Republican senator should never have to face those choices. But we did the best we could, and we did get some tax cuts done.
Secretary Ashcroft, 60 seconds.
They're a bad idea. If we have money to give in tax credits, we shouldn't have taken the money in the first place. We should have left it with the people. And I'm proud, as Secretary of State, that I've actually returned millions of dollars back to the budget that we did not spend. I'm proud that when Senator Hageman, a couple of years ago, and he's not a part of the debate, so I can say that, tried to put money in my budget for a pork barrel project and said he was with the legislature, he ran appropriations, and I had to take it. I said, you're right. You can force it in there, but I will not spend it because I will not spend that money like that. I will protect the people of this state. Thank you.
All right, the next three questions are to each of you individually. Senator Eigel, these are going to get a little close to the vest. I'm going to give you guys an opportunity individually to respond to potentially some criticisms that might be out there. You will get 90 seconds individually, but you will not get to respond to the other candidates' questions. Senator Eigel, you've made the statement publicly that on day one of your first term as governor, you would sign an executive order to arrest and deport all illegal aliens in Missouri.
That's right.
Legal experts critique this as political pandering and not legally possible. Do you believe that your executive order will truly result in the deportation of all illegals in Missouri?
Yes, and by the way, I'm not afraid of the experts. It was the experts that gave us the COVID environment, so it's okay to rub against the grain. Yes, I am going to declare an invasion. That's actually identified in Article 4 of our Constitution. I've been calling for an Article 4 declaration by the governor for years and years, and it hasn't done that. And absolutely, that will give the governor the power to direct the Highway Patrol, the National Guard, and every sheriff in every county of the state to detain and deport every illegal immigrant that's in the state right now. And I don't think that it's a problem that we don't know where we're at. You can't have 70,000 people in the state of Missouri and no one knows. I've talked to those sheriffs. They know exactly where they are. They're lacking the authority to act. And what's really frustrating to me is that we don't actually need an election for this to be fixed. We don't need to wait until January. But our statewide leadership right now continues to do nothing on this issue. Our governor continues to do nothing. While the illegal immigrants are overrunning our communities, he's in Kansas City talking to the Chiefs and Royals, trying to figure out how to give them more of your money. That's why Missouri is stagnating. That's what's going to be different in an Eigel administration. I'm not going to let the so-called talk from the experts or the science deter me from doing what I know is right. We're going to detain and deport every single one of these illegal immigrants, and we're going to take our communities back.
Senator Eigel, thank you. All right, a new question for Secretary Ashcroft. It is my understanding that you are here to make your case to the great people of Missouri, that you are qualified and ready to serve as their next governor. You have made the statement that, quote, politicians fix blame, engineers fix problems. Your status as an engineer has been called into question. Are you an engineer?
I am an engineer. I have 2 ABET accredited engineering degrees from what used to be the University of Missouri-Rolla. It's now Missouri Science and Technology. I spent almost 5 years working as an engineer in the defense industry in West Plains, Missouri. I then taught mechanical engineering and mechanical engineering technology and was, by the way, certified by the state to do that for 6 years. But beyond that, why in the world are Republicans asking whether or not the government has to give us permissions to go out and work? Legally, I'm an engineer, but it's none of the government's business. We need to get rid of this red tape. We need to allow people to live their lives the way they see fit instead of kowtowing to some faceless bureaucrat.
Thank you, Secretary Ashcroft. Mr. Wright, you are clearly a dedicated public servant. You are also a lesser-known name and face to many Missouri voters. You've campaigned, from what I understand, for 2 years. Do you believe you can win the Republican nomination for governor of the state of Missouri?
I do, otherwise I wouldn't do this. I don't do things to suck. I know I'm against big names, but whenever you start doing things outside the box and start getting people's attention, people get to talk. I've used the money that I've raised and spent on my own in a different way to get my name out there. And I just honestly believe the best way to build your name is organically. Show people that you're willing to work hard. Show people you're willing to travel. Show people you're willing to do something different instead of the same old, same old, same old, because we're all sick and tired of the same old, same old. And at the end of the day, you know, polls can say whatever they want. If you believe in a poll, you're silly because they're all over the place. And it's all about who's pushing that poll out. The fact of the matter is the people are going to decide this. And, you know, I've had a fight against media, not giving me the time of day, but I think today we made a big fix towards that. In 2 weeks, there's a debate going on by KSDK. I wasn't invited because I didn't raise enough money, but they don't know I have my own money. And I'm not boasting. I'm just saying it's not all about how much money you can raise. You can get your support somewhere else. And so I just keep fighting the good fight and show everybody that, you know, I'm not a quitter, and you're not going to stop me.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Our next question starts with Secretary Jay Ashcroft. How will you address the fentanyl crisis, with fentanyl continuing to pour over the borders into Missouri?
Well, you said it right there. The fentanyl is pouring over the border. We have a porous border. There are places where the only border, quote, wall we have, and it's not a wall, is one strand of barbed wire. That is ridiculous. The federal government has abdicated its responsibility under the United States Constitution to protect states from invasions. I will continue to send troops down to the border. I was the first individual running for governor to call to send troops for the border. I've called for a federal declaration of an invasion from governors for many years. I believe that what we also need to do is we need to stop the subsidies that we're giving to illegal aliens. We have 75, 77, probably 80,000, maybe 85,000 by now. We don't even know, because the government has not done their job. We will never get rid of all of them until we quit subsidizing them to be here. But additionally, beyond that, it's not just a fight in the legislature. It's not just a fight at the border. It is a fight in our courts. Just as I went to the United States Supreme Court leading 11 secretaries of state when Colorado and Maine had thrown Donald Trump off the ballot to make sure he was put back. Just as I went to the United States Supreme Court and filed a brief there with Moore v. Harper to make sure that Missouri could control its own elections. I will not only take care of what needs to be done in this state, but I will fight in the courts to make sure that we can stand up for what's right. We can stop illegal immigration, and we can punish criminally those individuals severely that bring fentanyl into our state.
Secretary Ashcroft, thank you. Mr. Wright, how will you address the fentanyl crisis in the state of Missouri?
There's really only a few ways, and number one, we're all going to talk about it, and that is closing the border, or assisting Texas and the border states with closing the border, sending our military down there. I personally don't believe in sending our state troopers down there. We already have enough problems here in Missouri, but we do have a very formidable National Guard who they are proficient in infantry tactics, and they are also military police. We can send 500, 600, 700, something that's going to make a real difference. And we've also got to talk more about not only the prevention, but it's already here. It's already a crisis. So we've got to put out measures that are protecting our medical staff, our law enforcement staff, our EMT personnel. We've got to get Narcan in everybody's hand. That is a life-saving way whenever there's a accidental potential overdose. We've got to be more proactive. We can't just be happy with how things are going. At the end of the day, you got to get people who will get off their rear ends and work and work and work, because this is a serious problem, and I will lead that charge. I will lead that charge and outwork everybody to get the training out there, to get the people involved, build the networks, build the teams, because, as we all know, it's a very serious issue.
Mr. Wright, thank you. Senator Eigel, how will you address the fentanyl crisis in the state of Missouri?
Well, I think we need to understand that the same way the fentanyl is getting into our state is the same way that illegal immigrants are getting into our state. It's the same way that human trafficking is getting into our states. It's coming through these soft-on-crime regimes in our urban areas in Kansas City and St. Louis City. And when Jefferson City was needed to intervene and say that's not okay anymore, what did our leadership in Jefferson City do? They did nothing. And so those cities have continued to descend into chaos. Here's what I'm going to do. Number one, I've already said that on my first day, I'll sign another executive order tripling the highway patrol presence leading into and out of those cities that are being used as conduits for criminal activity, and not just affecting St. Louis City, but St. Louis County, the collar counties, and the counties around Kansas City. That's number one. But two, I'm going to be the guy that's going to confront Mayor Jones and Mayor Quinton Lucas for their failure of leadership for more than a generation. More than a generation. There's only two areas in our state. One area that's been under Democratic control since World War II, that's St. Louis City, and look how that's working out for us. We're going to take control of the St. Louis police force through legislation at the state level, because I know that the Republicans in Jefferson City under my leadership will fund those cops with the tools and equipment they need to get the job done. And two, to prevent the next travesty of the next Kim Gardner that may come down the road in St. Louis City or Kansas City, I support something called concurrent jurisdiction, which means if we have any more prosecutors in those cities that don't want to put bad guys in jail, we'll empower the Republican Attorney General to do their job for them, and we will protect our citizens.
Thank you, Senator Eigel. Secretary Ashcroft, 60 seconds to follow up.
I've put out a plan to put 1,000 new law enforcement officers on the street. I've pledged, as many others have after me, to take control of the city of St. Louis police officers back and have the state in charge. Because of what I've pledged to do for law enforcement officers, the Ethical Society of Police Officers has endorsed me, a Republican, something they don't generally do, but they know that we need a change. And what we need is leadership that is not handcuffed to only working with the government of the city of St. Louis, but is willing to stand up and say, this is going to happen regardless. The people of the city of St. Louis deserve to have public safety, and we will do it regardless of what you say. And with regard to prosecutors, we don't need concurrent jurisdiction. We need to remove prosecutors that won't do their job, because the taxpayers shouldn't pay for a prosecutor that won't do their job, and we need to put a prosecutor in there that will prosecute them. I've actually worked on legislation with agreement from the Prosecutors Association to get special prosecutors appointed.
Secretary, thank you. Mr. Wright, up to 60 seconds for a follow-up.
As far as, agreeing with all these, obviously I do, but I want to take it a step further with, I love Jay's idea of having 1,000 new officers, but the reality is that's going to take time. We've got to recruit, we've got to train, we've got to qualify. They've got to go through an academy, and then they're brand new officers on the street. One of the things that I'm going to bring is, again, talking about the National Guard. We have so many men and women that are capable and ready that can at least make that presence in the street to start deterring some of this that's going on in the streets. Our police officers are so understaffed, they can't do everything and be everywhere. And I'm not saying our National Guard's gonna go around arresting people and kicking doors in. No, they're going to be that presence, because criminal soft target over a hard target every single time. And so just to maybe piggyback onto, there's just a lot more to it than a two-word answer. There's so much that goes into fighting such an epidemic and crime such as what's going on with the fentanyl and the open borders.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Senator Eigel, your 60-second follow-up.
Well, I think the question has to be lingering in the audience here, and probably for a lot of the folks listening, of why hasn't the Republican governor confronted these regimes in in St. Louis City and Kansas City already? Why hasn't he done that? Why hasn't Governor Kehoe, who's too afraid to be here tonight, joined and called on the governor to take more of a proactive role? The reason they've done that is because remember those budgets we were talking about that have doubled the size of government? Well, guess who's been voting against those budgets for the past 6 years? I have. A few other conservatives have, which means that our governor and our lieutenant governor have had to work to win the votes of Democrats down there in the cities. And you can't turn around and hold those cities accountable if you need all those Democratic votes to pass your Joe Biden level spending bills in the Missouri Senate. That's what's going on. That's why our senior leadership is compromised. I'm going to have an entirely different perspective. We're going to cut the spending. I'm going to start from the most conservative senator and count to 18. We're going to have a balanced budget, a conservative budget, and when that's done, I'm going to be holding those regimes, those soft-on-crime regimes, accountable in the cities if they don't protect their citizens.
Thank you, Senator Eigel.
I've lost track.
That's fine, I've got it. Mr. Wright, you get this question first, and I'm going to ask you, for all three of you, in the essence of time, to stay on topic, and we're not going to do rebuttals on this one. I don't think we should need to. This is a question, starting with Mr. Wright. Do you support tax subsidies for the Chiefs and Royals to stay in Missouri? Joanne W. would like to know.
Again, ridiculous. It's not no, I don't. Billionaires can pay for their own stadiums. The local people of Jackson County spoke overwhelmingly. They don't want it. Why are we going to do it with the state? Absolutely not.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Senator Eigel, you've spoken on this, but any clarity? Do you support tax subsidies for the Chiefs and Royals to stay in Missouri?
No, of course not. Again, I'll say it again. Is $18 for a hot dog not enough for these billionaire owners? I mean, the next $1 billion that we find in Jefferson City, we're going to use it to cut your personal property tax, and then we're going to go after income taxes. The reason I think that so many Republicans are frustrated with their statewide leadership right now is because while we're here right now, our governor, our Republican governor, is slobbering over the Kansas City Chiefs and the Royals right now, trying to figure out how he can bribe them with your tax dollars instead of addressing the fact that your property tax assessments have gone up 30% year over year, that your personal property tax bills went up 20% last year, that income tax receipts, in spite of our efforts to cut the rate, have gone up by 30 or 40% during his term as governor. He's not serious about being a fiscal conservative, and the reason Mike Kehoe isn't here, who's been endorsed by that same governor, is he's afraid to stand in front of you and admit that he's going to be just more of the same status quo. I offer an entirely different vision of the future. I offer the vision of the Missouri that I know that you want because you show up every other year on the first Tuesday in November and demand it. The only reason you haven't gotten it is because of these soft, rhino, weak-kneed Republicans down in Jefferson City that refuse to do what they promised they would do in campaign season. It's a new day in Missouri, folks. We're going to lead this country. Let's go, Missouri.
Thank you, Senator Eigel. And Secretary Ashcroft.
Short answer, no. I thought we had already answered this one, but let me just add something to that. Does anybody remember when St. Louis had a pro basketball team? Incentives didn't work to keep them. Does anybody remember the St. Louis Cardinals football team? Your incentives and your taxpayer dollars didn't keep them. Does anybody remember, I hate to bring it up, the St. Louis Rams? I don't want to say a whole lot about the governor that brought them here, but it didn't work. We should not be subsidizing them. It's an easy answer. Well, I'll be polite and just say no.
No, okay, gotcha. Another one that I'd like to be able to go through without having to dip into rebuttals. Senator Eigel, you're going to go first. Would you support legislation moving school board elections to the August or November elections?
Oh, absolutely. I think yes, absolutely. I think that the way that the status quo has been able to keep control of our local school board elections is by holding those elections when most people don't show up. By the way, I'll expand on that. I also think that any tax increase proposal ought to go in front of the people only in November so that everybody can have their voice heard of whether or not they think the tax burden, which is already at a record level, ought to get bigger. So this is how the status quo has been fighting this. They get these low turnout elections in April and May to make bad choices in these elections. And I tell you, right now we are seeing progress in these elections. We've seen more actual parents, conservatives, constitutionalists elected to school boards or city boards than we have in the past. But the swamp will use any mechanism it can like this to keep us down. We're not going to let that happen.
Thank you, Senator. Secretary Ashcroft, would you support legislation moving school board elections to the August or November elections?
Not only would I, but I provided the legislative language to Representative Rob Vescovo, who introduced it several years back, because I thought it was also a good idea, and I worked with him. Unfortunately, it did not pass. Should we move everything like that to the November general election? Yes. I don't think we ought to have any tax increases, period, though. And secondly, I think it's far better. I mean, that's a preliminary step. But the best step is to have parents in charge of the money so they can send their kids to whatever school they want to and the school that is best for their children. That's how we really hold schools accountable.
Thank you, Secretary. Mr. Wright, school board elections, would you support it, moving them to August or November?
I'm going to be that guy and give you a one-word answer. Yes, I would.
Oh, it's okay.
These
Thank
guys
you.
covered it. There's no need to beat a dead horse. Let's get another question.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Wright. Secretary Ashcroft, I'm going to ask you all one more question. Again, no rebuttals. I don't think we should have rebuttals for this last question before we do closing statements. Obviously, this is a primary. You're all fighting campaigns. You want to win. You all have visions for Missouri. Many people know I'm from Illinois. I would take all of you and any of you. You are great warriors for your state.
Move west anytime.
Yeah, yes, I understand. I would like to know if any of your contenders, if you fear any of your contenders, them winning over a Democrat in November, or will you support your opponents in the primary should they get the nomination over the Democrats come November?
Well, I could support all the individuals that are here. I must say that there's one individual that's running for the Republican nomination for governor that at one time was a member of the Ku Klux Klan. I think that is wholly inappropriate. I think that our party should have rejected his filing fee, and he never should have been allowed to run as a Republican, because anti-Semitic or racist, it's a name you guys won't know probably, and I'm not going to mention his name because I don't want to give him that publicity. But people that would join the Klan should never be allowed to run as Republicans in this state. And if I have to choose between someone like that, I will not vote for them.
Could you, in light of the way you answered that question, tell us the candidates you would support?
There was just the one candidate I said I wouldn't support.
Would you support these gentlemen? And who else is running?
I said for how many times do I have to answer the question? I just said there was one that I would not support, and that's the individual that had been a member of the Ku Klux Klan.
Mr. Wright, would you support the Republican opponents that you have in the primary should they get the nomination over you in
I will
November?
make it very clear. Us three that are standing up here are the only three who should be in consideration for the governorship. We absolutely cannot let a Democrat or a super rhino that I won't name who isn't here have control over such a high power in this state. And here's the deal, and I've said it before. You're going to vote Bill for whatever you want to vote Bill for. You're going to vote Jay, whatever you want to vote Jay for. You're going to vote for me for whatever you want to vote me for. But the reality of it is we all have different approaches to trying to get things done. But I think it's very clear all three of us who showed up today love Missouri, love the Constitution, and love America.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Senator Eigel, same question.
Yeah, if Mike Kehoe is not willing to stand up in front of all of you folks and answer your questions, I don't know that I'm ready to say that I'll ever support him, because I think he owes it to every Republican voter in the state to answer why he's been so Democrat-like in his time in public office. I want to hear why he voted for the largest tax increase in the history of the state. I want to hear why he voted to allow our land to be sold to China. And the fact that he's hiding from you right now. I just want you to know this is what the swamp does. They don't feel like they're accountable to you. They don't feel like your opinions matter. They feel like they can act with impunity regardless of what you want. It's on display with an empty podium, although we don't have an empty podium here tonight. This is what's wrong in Jefferson City. We have folks elected to protect your rights that don't think that you matter. Mike Kehoe doesn't. I actually saw Mike Kehoe right here in St. Louis about an hour and a half ago at a gas station in Chesterfield. I asked him if he was going to be here tonight. He did not say yes. And I tell you, if he's afraid to meet the voters in a forum like this, he's a long way from earning my vote. So I will say that I very much respect both of my opponents for appearing on the stage here today. I believe in my message for what it's worth, and I think that we're going to have a nominee. I want to see a nominee that's going to unite our party, but is going to be willing to confront that status quo. And if that person is elected, as I think that person will be in August 6th, of course I'm going to be supporting that person.
Thank you, Senator.
Oh, wait. Oh, sorry.
All right, we are going to go to closing statements. You will each get 3 minutes to make your final case to the voters who are here to see you and those who are listening to us right now live on 97.1 FM Talk. Mr. Wright, you have the honors to go first.
Way to mess it up. No, I'm kidding. Here's the deal, and I've made it very clear. And again, anybody that knows me or anybody that has listened to me on the campaign trail, I'm not here to knock anybody. So whenever I say this, it's not a knock on my opponents. It's just the fact that I am not a politician. I do not belong to the political apparatus. Go look at the money. Go look at the Missouri Ethics Commission report. I don't owe anybody any favors. Now, every time I go out somewhere, it's always the same complaint. I sure wish we could fix politics. I sure wish somebody had me as their best interest in mind. You literally have the guy here for that, to fit that mold. I may not know everything, but we all know the governor's going to have handlers. So if there's a question I don't know or something I don't know, I'm going to ask an expert. But where I can differentiate between others is I can look at their heart. I can read people. That's just the ability I've had as a police officer. So what I'm saying is we are all three good candidates. But if you truly want to change something, and again, it's not a knock on them, stop electing and promoting the same politicians.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Senator Eigel, 3 minutes for your closing statement.
Well, you know, I think that right now Donald J. Trump is winning the country right now on the idea that he's going to be a disruptor for Washington, D.C. And part of being that disruptor that's going to break up the status quo up there means you can't always be a nice guy. I tell you what, there's nobody on this stage or in this race that's been more of a disruptor of the status quo than I have over the past 8 years, because I've been willing to confront them for their bad policies. I've killed their legislation on the Senate floor because I love to talk so much. I've passed bills that moved our state forward. And most importantly, over the past 2 years, I've talked about a Missouri that is going to be the envy and a leader in these United States. We are missing an opportunity. We're missing an opportunity because of this weak Republican leadership to be a leader in these United States. We're missing an opportunity for other states to follow our lead. And just because the swamp can't imagine the Missouri that I'm talking about, they can't imagine a Missouri without personal property tax or without illegal immigrants or without voting machines, doesn't mean it can't be a reality, because the choice is in your hands. And I know that I've got an advantage in this race because you've already been asking for the Missouri I'm talking about. I'm asking you to show up on August 6th and do something the swamp doesn't expect. Don't go for the name, don't go for the money, go for the vision of Missouri that your children and your grandchildren will wake up and thrive in. Maybe you'll have children or grandchildren right here in the Show Me State. It's worth fighting for. And the fact that one of our opponents, Mike Kehoe, doesn't feel like he's answerable to you, doesn't feel like it's worth his time to be on this stage to answer why he's been joining with the status quo in the swamp for more than 16 years that he's been in public office, I think says all that you need to know about an individual that can't look you in the eye and tell you why he's been betraying you. I think that the calling for the Republican Party is to be the defender of rights, to be the champions of liberty. Everything that has gone wrong in this state can be traced back to failures of weak-kneed Republicans. Even the COVID environment. The COVID environment could have been stopped with a few well-placed executive orders from our chief executive, but it didn't happen. Ask yourselves, do you think we're going to get to a better place by good copping our way, by being reasonable or compromising in the swamp? The folks down there say I'm mean and I'm uncompromising. To a lot of degree, they're darn right. I will be your champion. Together, we will overthrow the swamp, just like we overthrew them at the state convention a few months ago. And we will provide a Missouri that will be the envy of the greatest nation on earth.
Thank you, Senator Eigel. And for our final closing statement, with 3 minutes, Secretary Jay Ashcroft.
It's an election season. It's an even-numbered year. You're going to hear a lot of talk. What I would ask you to do is look behind the talk, look behind the TV commercials and the radio commercials, and look at the action. Look at what was accomplished. Because the people of Missouri deserve a fighter, but not just a fighter that will actually move conservative policy forward. As Secretary of State, I made sure we went from being ranked 11th in the nation to being in the top 3, according to Heritage Foundation, with regard to our elections and our election laws. When I saw a problem with what was happening with the funding of our public libraries and material that was inappropriate for children, I tried to work with the legislature, but the legislature failed, so I implemented a rule that would cut off funding if parents were not put in charge of what their children were receiving at libraries. And if those libraries tried to use those funds for pornographic or obscene materials, it would cut it off also. When I saw what was happening with woke ESG investments across this country, where hard-earned money was being taken from people and invested in things they disagreed with, it was okay to do that in 49 states. It's no longer legal to do it in the state of Missouri. The House worked with us. The Senate failed. So I passed a rule to say no more. And if you do that to the people of Missouri, we will come after you, because it's their money and they should be in charge. When it was coming up for redistricting, I led the fight to go to a 7-1 map instead of electing more Democrats than we had to in the U.S. Congress. Wasn't successful in that one, but it did stop the 5-3 map, and at least we ended up with a 6-2. I have a record of fighting for conservative ideals, of moving policies forward, not just because of this year, not just because of last year, but because of the 8 years I've actually served, and I've served the people. I humbly ask for your vote on August 6th so that we can move Missouri forward. And instead of having governance, let's have leadership that calls us to be better than we realize we can do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary Ashcroft. I want to thank everybody for coming and attending tonight. Voters, you are the most important people in this room. We know that you have a tough decision ahead of you, but we appreciate all of the time that you have spent with us and forward to a very exciting election season that is ahead of us. Thank you and good night.
Hold on a minute. How about these guys? And I want to tell you something. CNN, she said they were great moderating. You're the best. Thank you, Annie. Everybody, thank you for coming. I hope this has helped you tonight. The more you learn about our candidates, the more educated you will be, and the best you will make the good choice in voting. Drive safe.
This has been coverage of the Republican Governors Forum, presented by the Republican Central Committee of St. Louis. KFTK FM Florissant.
An Odyssey station.
Air Comfort Service, heating, cooling, and insulation, weather.
Chief Meteorologist Dave Murray.
Not the best of news for all the evening plans on this 4th of July. We have our last batch of very unsettled weather coming through with heavy rainmakers at times.